Alright, let me just check. Okay, I can see I'm recording, I can see we've got sound. I'm going to talk as loudly as I can. Kind of got the settings set up so that should all be working. Look, I am in a windy zone, my apologies, lots of birds going on around me. I've got training on later today, so time frame wise, I'm limited. So I'm a bit later starting this video than I'd want to be. The time of this video will be compressed, so it should make it a little bit tighter. That's the intention. And just continuing on a thread. So anyone that's thinking, oh, this isn't for me, tune on. No, this video is so relevant for you. Probably it's part of a series of videos that could be the most impactful on the lives of you or everybody or anybody that you might know. It's trying to go for global reach. It's trying to go about quality of life improvement for everybody and raising it. The general theme of my challenge as a conscientious consumer generally is about realising what's not working for us and discussing that sometimes in ways that, hey, I might be a bit negative, but generally I'm trying to just be upbeat, focus on a solution and discussing that. So continuing on from where we've been previously is the notion of being employed, and employed in a role that you actually wish to do, or working for a company that you have faith in to look after you, is such that you choose not to leave them, and the quality of the skill set that you then bring into said organisation gets to stay, which improves the reliability of everyone on your team as being able to depend on you. We also have less attrition, is the big one, but when you're free to go off and do study for relevant fields and things that you wish to be doing, or skill sets that you wish to be growing or adding. I've set the wind cut up strong. It's pretty windy. Look, when you choose to do the things you wish to do, and you're going to stick at it for longer, that's fairly important. Now, it's not to say that when we have a global enterprise, when we have people working for such a large organisation, all roles need to be done, right? But we change standard social conditions, standard economical control in countries is that you change the value of any given job, right? If people won't pick up rubbish, you pay a bit more money until people are willing to pick up rubbish, right? That's just the standard way business and society have worked for a long time. I say this as someone that was recycling rubbish at 16 years of age because I could pay a month of rent by working for a couple of days, right? So this stuff is normal, right? So certainly we have a range of jobs to fill, but we have a happy, engaged workforce that brings down fatigue, the costs of accidents, all the sorts of things that the general business have to deal with in terms of the litigity of looking after people who might fall sick or just due to rushed systems don't get the duty of care or the due diligence to perform the care of their role that should be done. And a bird crap missed that lens by less than a centimetre just then. That was amazing. So, alrighty. Look, I'm not trying to inject humour. I do generally try to keep a light or upbeat method in my videos. If you've watched this far and you haven't spun on, congratulations, because obviously the topic I've just talked about at the start there seems only relevant to a very specific thread. Obviously you will be thinking, hey, this isn't for me, I haven't been watching the others. Well, this video should be less than 30 minutes. If you get to the end of it, there'll be a link. I'll probably link back to my last one. The microphone on that at the moment isn't ideal. I did have a secondary recording of a Bluetooth mic, which was clearer. It did run out probably about 40 minutes into the video. So I'm in the next couple of days, as soon as I get a weekend, I'm going to get some video editing software. I'll probably re-encode that video with the sound feed from a off-camera camera. Because it was clearer for the first part. Right now I'm trying to do the same thing. I'm speaking louder than I've spoken in any video I've ever done. I am using a directional microphone, Rode, buy my pitching Rode. They're Australian made, I'm in Australia. I do think consumers should always support their local bricks and mortar store, should always be buying products ideally that are manufactured in a zone or a perimeter that's close to them. It just brings down supply lines and the relevant costs on the planet. Like, they can say, oh, that's just all Greenpeace hippie stuff. Look, nothing wrong with Greenpeace, but look, is it hippie stuff? Maybe. Is it changing a mindset? Maybe. Do I do it myself? Not always. That being said, I just about always buy from a bricks and mortar store. It's only a couple of times in my life I've bought through mail order. Case in point, the memory cards in this camera, so I bought them locally. There was none in the market. The one or two shops that said they had stock, the prices they were selling them for were about 3 times what it was costing me to buy these cards, being able to record HDR10. I didn't even get the top of the line ones. I went with the ones that are just technically good enough, and saved myself quite a few $100s. So look, we can't always afford things, I understand. Do we have to be ethical in our purchases? Absolutely. This is a bit of a tangent, bit of a segue. Look, I buy my milk from what would be a small batch milkery. I know that the cows are better looked after. I'm not saying it makes me sleep better at night. You know, can myself as a family, as someone who's raising a family who has probably higher food costs than the standard household, can I afford to do such things? Maybe. If I weigh up what's important, and weigh up how I want to support my country and or myself, arguably, because that's what we're doing when we support our local economy. The money goes into the local businesses, those local businesses spend it potentially in other local businesses, it goes around and around and around, everybody gets a slice of the cut, everybody's propped up, and there's videos by many other people, not me. It's not the theme of any of my channel videos, arguably, but look, case in point with why it's important to keep the level of training we get and possibly give better training, because it's not happening right now. I can qualify the last 2 courses I've done, which is a security license course and driving heavy rigid vehicles, right, which 20 years ago when there was all sorts of incidents happening around the world where people were deeming that certain things were very dangerous, nobody factored in how dangerous driving a B-double or a massive lorry could be. And I think somebody made the case in point and actually drove a big vehicle through a crowded zone. Don't think anybody was necessarily hurt. Well, people might have been hurt, but there might not have been any fatalities, but irrelevant. The point is that I'm doing a course in both those occasions that should be of a high calibre and which should be held to a certain standard. And due to the nature of businesses making money and or the need for bums on seats for jobs having people to actually fill the roles, the nature of these courses get brought down to half the length of time. And so I'm a couple of days into this course now, and it's just standard affair of none of the materials that we're showing you. We're skimming through them, we're skipping over the videos that might not be necessary, we're then getting a feel through this paperwork where nothing really joins the dots. Now some of it does, but we don't get to keep any of this paperwork which we could then use as reference materials. We don't get any reference materials because that's a cost. And so, yeah, sure, some paperwork gets left at the head office at the end of the course, meaning if there's an incident down track, they can go, well, did they learn this information? And they can hold the paperwork up and go, yep, they had a correct answer here, which we ticked off as they had learnt this. And so, at the moment, one of the things we've learnt is about the chain of responsibility, and that every person in an organisation might be responsible. That there certainly are positions of management or positions of higher rate of pay which are meant to be responsible, and we therefore have to escalate points of information to them. That being said, my housemate and myself have both lost our last jobs because we said no. Something by Australian law we're entitled to do when we're in a potentially dangerous or hazardous situation where our health is being compromised. It's outside of the roles of the job that we're being employed for, etc., etc. And by being the squeaky wheel and being yes people otherwise, and always working very hard and being otherwise the best employees, but not wanting the business not wanting to let anybody role model, you can do that. We're the first people as casuals that just never get any more shifts or get the shifts downgraded or just, not allowed to turn back up at work anymore. This is standard affair. Now, is a video like this important? Well, it is, because I can absolutely assure you that the training that people are getting, whilst employers assume that paper saying that you've got that course is worth something, it might have been once, but every couple of years these courses get halved in length, and the stress of people who aren't getting good sleep, turning up to these courses, who just know if they can just get to the end of the course and get that paperwork, they get a job, they take the attitude of once I'm on the job I'll potentially learn it. But we're talking here a range of different tasks. The 2 courses I did were potentially longer than others. They were of a very, I would say, higher standard than what is typically sought out. I do know one of them, people had travelled across the country to come get it as due to the quality of the course. The one I'm doing right now is considered one of the better ones in the industry, and I've got to say I'm coming in fatigued, don't get me wrong. I get stressed because I can see it's happening all over again, where it's just like meat to the grind, we'll just push you through. And I look around the room at a lot of people who aren't engaging in the class at the level that I've done some teaching. I've studied to be a teacher at university. There are certain micro skills involved in, as a teacher, keeping the class engaged, but also just checking. And sometimes it's through rote teaching, sometimes it's you say a point several times, maybe in slightly different words. You're looking for a cognition in the faces of your students, and the classes aren't being taught at that rate. Now there's another thing, which is the number of students that should be in a class. I haven't done an informal head count. In my head right now I potentially can, and it's higher than 20. When I look around the classroom, we've got 3 teachers' assistants in the classroom who are essentially glorified language and literacy teachers. Oh, they're not. That's exactly what they are. They're probably primary school education teachers who are coming in as casuals, who are just assisting people to fill out the paperwork. And my problem is with admin, right? It's not specific to the course I'm doing. The course I'm doing is wonderful. As I say, one of the higher grade ones out there, and I can actually see the level of quality. We've got 3 different departments, including government, all coalescing to bring the quality of the presentation to top tiered. And we've had that. We've had personalised. I've been pulled out of the room. We've had little groups of 3 or 4 cover modules to make sure that they are being covered in the right order. So I don't want to pick on the course I'm doing, but I just know that globally these things aren't happening in accordance. So I used to work for a fellow who was an aircraft engineer from Britain, where I think it was 7 years before they were allowed to touch a piece of machinery in the field, arguably. Whereas other countries had that course in a lot less than half that time, and people get on planes all around the world, and obviously when we're buying a plane ticket we're usually looking for the cheapest one. So hand in hand, what do you think is going to happen in a short amount of time, right? So we're building a whole bunch of systems that are going to fail, everybody's tightening their belts, and eventually what will happen is people will start to go, well hang on, when did the chinks start to appear? And it really starts with our training not being potentially at the calibre it used to be at. It starts with higher attrition rates, all the things that the modern world has become. 20, 30 years ago, well, 40 years ago, a job was considered something you'd have not for life, right? We'd already whittled it down to possibly 10 years. 30 years ago, it was probably about 7 years. 20 years ago, it was probably, about that. It was about 5 years people were in a profession for before they generally changed into a different area. So we're losing a lot of pre-trained skill sets. Obviously, people are finding a lot of dissatisfaction in their current employment situations. Yes, this doesn't sound like a solution video, but if you watch my other videos, I really would like to set up a structure where everybody can be employed by a ethical, be it a charity if you will, but all integrated, everybody working together. When you've got enough people working for you, you can actually have flexibility and diversity in the roles that people can do. You can have a lot of doubling up of, and this comes down to proper pay structures, but also focusing on tunneling the profits into the staff, essentially everybody that's connected to the organisation, so that when you've got doubling up of positions, all sorts of current world paradigm employment methods of, for example, a female is less attractive for certain positions in a business due to the nature of, if they were to get pregnant, to have that skill set forcibly taken off the floor when you can't necessarily get a trained, responsible person to resume at the same quality that they were trained up at in a heartbeat. So that isn't seen as possible, right? But in an organisation where you've potentially got more people trained up to do a role, and the flexibility to bring them in and on a demands or a needs basis, means that those sorts of those isms drop off. A lot of the difficulties do drop off, and certainly when you're part of a workforce that you can't take your breaks, which is the last few jobs I've worked. You can't get your 10-minute breaks because everything's just too tight, because everything's going to be all about profit and not about people. The satisfaction with jobs, everything, the difficulties make it such that people quit, which of course just exacerbates the issue. So when you've got the ability for people to train in ways that makes them happy, train for things they wish to do, and again, people do choose to clean toilets on the basis that it does pay better. The unattractive roles, which in the world I come from, considered the modern sweatshop in the Western world, is the call centres. And so the way to get people, you've got to make call centres lucrative in terms of pay in order to have people turn up at them, right? That's just a given. So not always ideal working conditions in call centres, although often they are the ones that have the best mental health care flow. They call them employment. They have a range of names for them, where it's like, like we just want you to be happy, and we're just going to recommend you do this, and we're going to give you the freedom to do that. And they're doing it really because they're just trying to drop the cost of attrition, right? They're doing it because whilst mental health drops the number of sick days, if you've got a good program in place to look after your employees that actually cares about them as an intact whole being, generally you do have less sick days a year, right? So the reasons why businesses do this is, of course, all still about profit. It's generally not about the people. So when we restructure from the top down and make quality of life the number one reason for being, if it's the mission statement, if you will, of said charity or organisation, then the quality of life does go up. The way you design every position, the way you think about everything when you're coming up with your systems or your standard operating policies or procedures, everything is just all about, lowering the stress, ensuring that there's redundancy in the position such that you've got multiple people who can do it, such that you've got that flexibility. If someone wakes up and just really doesn't feel like coming into work for whatever reason, it's not a stress either for them or for the organisation, right? And therefore, self-esteem stays high. Everything, people can live with dignity. It's fairly important that we go down this path when we start to assess what's important in life. We realise that it is, of course, our loved ones. We're all becoming very insular. We've got this fear-based world that we live in at the moment, where due to basically when something gets so scary that you just want to push it out of your periphery, everyone's now disengaging with media, but they're more arguably trying to stay focused on their families. Yet if we statistically look at the way families are going, in the Western world, since the no-fault divorce, the notion of single parents raising children became a thing within a couple of decades. A decade or so after that, we've basically got children raising children. Then with the advent of digital technology, where everybody's engaging with that all the time, we now have people who aren't even learning basic facial expressions or the self-confidence or the engagement to be able to deal with people on a one-on-one basis. I say this, just yesterday I was at a table with a bunch of parents, and they were talking about the nature of these children, and they all have children, some of them grandchildren, and they were saying, look, they're keyboard warriors and they're very tough when they're communicating through their portal, but per usual you put them in a social situation and they mouse up, and they're basically unable to be directed. And as a person who's got family who run multiple businesses, they generally have seen it that the cut-off age for employment has basically gone up by a year every year. They've just realised there's a certain generation that is just about unemployable. I've seen that. I've attempted to be the human resource officer for a lot of the businesses I've worked for. I've actually run a few businesses myself. I see the difficulties with trying to find certain staff members, and the skill set of being able to engage with customers. We can't just have that in a growing and aged population. We need to have the new generation being just as capable. And whilst we want to empower everybody to be creative, the nature of people's personal issues being more important than the world or the workplace, that's not the ethics, I guess, that most people from my generation were raised with, which was you leave that stuff at the door when you come in on the floor. So, the times they are changing. We need to be dynamic. We need to come up with systems that's going to meet everybody's needs. We don't want to say toughen up buttercup. I believe personally, as an organisation, that I would be aiming to build. Yeah, I notice it's a bit pyramidical. It's because you need one, if you've got multiple snakes, multiple heads of something, when you want to go in a direction and all of a sudden there's this difference of a direction, and you're losing all this energy trying to pull in different directions. They often say the best committee is a committee of one, but we, using correct methods, have a board with the right directions in place and everything going through a particular filter of this is what the number one reason for us being is about. Everything else then just falls into place quite quickly. And so I have no dramas with people. If they wish to have their own personal dramas, that's fine. They can elect to do that, right? But that needs to be acknowledged. So they're successfully either segregated from people per their requirements, but also the requirements of other people. It becomes really stressful for other people when I guess we see this generation of juniors coming up that are just playing personal games with everybody because they don't feel they have personal power, and they're making their personal power about other things. And if you think I'm being mean, no, I've got a child. My child, per usual, like every child growing up, at the same age as every child growing up in my generation, had all the same gender issues as any child in my generation. We had the girls as tomboys in my generation. There's a lack of a femininity in guys because there has been toxic masculinity through the generations. That's now gone away, and I think that's now where the so-called tomboy, the girls now see it as attractive to be guys. But I mean, they're not being guys. Their notion is if they've got an open, intact emotional dialogue, right? That's not an archetypal guy, right? Men have 1,500 less emotional words, boys, in their dialogue by the age of about 15. That's why the suicide rate is definitely higher for the males through that era, even though we know that the childhood abuse is about 25% stronger on the females. In terms of sexual abuse, physical abuse, probably the other way around. It might be that sometimes an older boy in a household might shield the daughters from potential physical abuse. Mental abuse, that can go any which way. So I just raised my hands above my belt just there. Anyone that's suffered domestic violence at home probably just had an adrenal response. If I'd physically been in the room with you, if I was a salesperson, I just would have lost the sale. Your heartbeat would have raised for no reason that's cognizant, probably would have left the room. Right? So these are all things that we can redress. These are all things that are very important. What I say with regards to my own child, so that you don't just think I'm just playing a band camp and that my personal opinions matter. They don't, right? They are just my personal opinions, right? I've done everything I can to raise my child correctly. I've found in the modern world, by not being able to give basically any feedback systems that I would have grown up with, I was unable to get my child to clean their room. Ultimately, on the basis of a couple of years of not being able to get my child to clean a room, wash a dish, take a rubbish bin out, they opted to go to the other parent's household because they would be able to continue under a paradigm of doing nothing. That suits them. But if that generation wants to live that way, and if that's you, and if I'm offending you, right, well, there's a reason why a lot of people seem to be offending you, and you might think that you're not being heard, but at no other time in history would you be heard. Because if you're not constructively bringing anything back to society, and if you've got nothing to offer, why would anybody listen to you, right? Now, of course you have something to offer. Of course your creativity is wonderful, but believe it or not, the world has no position for artists if the rest of society can't structurally stay upright. So there's a lot going on, and the thing is that when we have children essentially bully authority figures in their workplace by being able to take the attitude of, oh, we're just going to walk out of here because we won't be instructed how to do something, which is what happens in a lot of businesses. Again, that might not be you, and there's a lot of people behind the camera here. If I'm aggravating you, fine, watch a few of my other videos, because you'll see that this is the one and only video where I've talked about this, because I know it is a disconnect, and I know it is a sour point or a sore point for many people. Right? But it is something that needs to be redressed, and therefore it is something that I need people to know is considered as part of this charity, that we are aware of the interpersonal needs of all the individual members, and everything is about propping people up. I am all for having creativity, but we need to have a society in order to have the value of art being perceived as valuable, right? If we have a falling apart planet, there's no time for creativity, there's no materials, you can't get your paint posted to you because the postal worker doesn't exist anymore to deliver it to your letterbox. Full stop. Right? Nobody's making those paints anymore. Right? It's just all stops happening. So we need to have a little bit of everything going on. I do believe we need to have a workplace that's flexible in terms of meeting the needs and getting the best of what people have to offer. You know, there are people out there that literally aspire to be bookmakers. Right? If you're in a classroom and the people are saying, oh, what do you wish to be when you grow up? And most people say, oh, I want to be something cool. You know, they say, oh, I want to be a firefighter, I want to be an astronaut, I want to be a dressmaker, or a fashion artist or something. Yeah, fine, right? And no genders there. I didn't mention any genders. There's no gender bias in here. But nobody really aspires to do the boring roles. Now, the truth is that some people just naturally are really good at doing those boring roles. My best friend in school is an actuary, a really, really good actuary, right? And he's made a living crunching numbers. Now, I don't know if AI is about to be able to replace his entire market segment. Probably has. So I can only imagine the stresses for them. So everybody needs that flexibility. I do believe if with a large enough organisation that there is a need for all roles to be fulfilled. So that's a key part of it. But we can't have a large organisation if we can't have anybody jumping to the beat of a drum that actually makes it happen. I've done videos that are trying to raise awareness of it. I mean, I've tried to reach out to politicians, but I now get into the nature of we have to go on a personal level. We need to kind of just unify. We need to find common minds, like-minded people who also have the same beliefs in place. The reason I do these videos is I guess I'm trying to espouse or put out there my beliefs so that people can understand a little bit more about where I'm coming from, what it is as a vision I'm trying to collectively get out there. So yeah, a lot of this video is just my personal beliefs, right? It's got nothing to do with said organisation, right? It's just arguably this is a fun video, but it's just to show that there's all these elements in play, and I don't believe that the world view that we've currently got is working for us at any level. I just see everything's crunching down and changing up in ways that isn't really working for us. As a civilization, we are driving off a cliff. We know this, and we're not changing course. So why? That's not the course of this video. The purpose of this video is to gradually make it digestible that there is a solution, there is an alternative, but it just comes down to working together. There's no other time in history that humanity's been able to be as connected as they possibly can be. Whilst we're not achieving that, but we could be, and it's very easy to be. And there's never been such a motivation as the last couple of years for us to potentially restructure the way things are going, because we're realising that there wasn't any resilience in the current supply lines or systems to, we'd all tightened our belts too much over the last 20 years. We all could trust that the factory could be filled, or that the warehouse could be filled with fresh parts basically instantaneously, and so everybody didn't keep their liquidity tied up in assets in the storeroom, because they just were like, oh, we can tighten the belt, we can keep the money focused on wages or whatever, and keep the business more profitable. So we've learnt in the last couple of years that we need to go back to having a little bit of resilience in our supply lines, or some such. Everybody's realising that we kind of need to go backwards a couple of steps, but you can't be a competitive business if you now try to implement the steps that are needed in order to go forward. So we're going to have a bunch of businesses pricing themselves out of the market because they're trying to stay in the short term. We're going to have a bunch of businesses who can't compete in the middle term because they are pricing themselves effectively to be there. And of course, in the meantime, we've got all the largest organisations just snapping up all the intellectual properties and everything that these smaller companies and smaller businesses own, and their brand names that might be still respected by consumers, and they just buy them up because it's cheaper to buy them up to either save the lawsuit or to get better brand recognition or better customer service statistics, because the small company was doing that, and now after adopting them, you can say, oh, look, we've got the most satisfied customers. Right? So big businesses, ultimately the unethical ones, will just squish everybody out of the market. We can see this is happening. The big businesses are bigger than countries or governments. Governments now no longer have the power to make the changes that are needed. So we need to get together, peoples. That's the point of this video. I've got a training course to get to. I'm going to wish you a wonderful day. To be continued. Please do go and watch some of my other videos if you find the time to do so. I believe it's worth everybody's time. Very worthwhile. They're going to get better. If not, maybe I need a team. I believe I need a team. All my videos are ready to go to be edited down, to be made tighter. You know, at the moment it's just about trying to get the words down, right? So if you're watching it in this state, then you're so raw to finding this that you're very much the breaking ground person. You're very much with me at a conceptual start. Alrighty, so thank you for the time that you've given me.